I would like to introduce you to the strange stories about Old Demon, as told by my father from his childhood memories. When recounting those years, my father always smiled, and the story he told most often was about a man with the nickname Old Demon. Old Demon was a strange old man. When he was young, he was an excellent hunter, but in his old age, his legs were no longer agile, and he took on the job of a forest ranger. Regardless of the season, he always wore an old padded jacket, a large smoking pipe tucked in his belt, and a wine gourd in his hand that was his familiar image. Because he always appeared with a strange appearance, a smoking pipe in his mouth, and the smell of tobacco smoke all over him, the villagers called him Old Demon, and his real name had long been forgotten. Old Demon stayed on the mountain most of the time, rarely coming down to the village. Only when he ran out of wine would he come down, and every time he did, my father would follow him. The children would always run after him, fawning over him. My father often volunteered to buy wine for him, hoping to get his attention and be more liked. Every time this happened, my father and his friends would compete to buy wine for him. He would only scold them, afraid that the children would break his precious wine gourd. In those days, there were no supermarkets everywhere like there are now. There were only trade stores selling all kinds of cigarettes, wine, tea, sugar, and daily necessities. There was no bottled wine like there is now, only high-proof homemade rice wine. Every time he bought wine, he would buy my father and the other children a few candies to eat. In those days, candy was an extremely valuable thing, not something you could eat any time. Therefore, the children loved following him to get candy. However, my father and his friends didn't fawn over him just for a few candies. They had another purpose, something even more appealing than the sweet treats. Here, everyone must be wondering what could be more appealing than candy. Old Demon also knew the children's intentions perfectly well, but he pretended not to know. It was to hear him tell stories. The life of Old Demon was a series of thrilling, fantastical stories, full of strange and unbelievable experiences. Old Demon knew the children's intentions. He would just laugh, saying that just by looking at them, he knew what they wanted. So there was no need to beat around the bush. However, he didn't start telling stories right away. He calmly took a few sips of wine from his gourd, savoring the spicy, familiar taste that he had been attached to for so many years. After that, he would pull the smoking pipe from his back. The pipe was old, stained with time, and had been his inseparable companion throughout those years. He would stuff tobacco into the pipe, light it, and take a few satisfying drags. The white smoke would spread out, carrying his characteristic, familiar scent. He would exhale a dense puff of smoke, his face full of enjoyment. After satisfying his craving, he would slowly begin to recall his story. Finally, after a round of begging from the children, he agreed to tell them a story. These were the strange experiences he had encountered during his life as a forest ranger. Old Demon watched over a forest. During the day, there were loggers on the mountain, so he didn't need to stand guard. He mostly spent his time sleeping. It was only at night that he would carry his rifle and go on patrol. He did this to prevent thieves from sneaking into the forest to steal wood, a very important job. One night, he was on patrol as usual. Although he was blind in one eye, his vision was extremely good, and he could see clearly in the dark without a light. When he reached the edge of a thick forest, he suddenly heard a clank, clank echoing from deep within, like the sound of someone forging iron. It was very strange. He was extremely puzzled. There were no houses in this forest, so why was there the sound of forging iron? The sound was like the clashing of weapons, very suspicious. He entered the forest, hiding behind a large tree. He peeked his head out, looking in the direction of the sound to see what was happening there. In a clearing in the forest, two people wearing armor were fighting with weapons. The sound he heard came from this fierce battle. The two of them, one with a yellow face and the other with a black face, were fighting viciously. They continuously launched dangerous attacks, determined to take the other's life. Having lived in the forest from a young age, Old Demon had encountered many strange things. He knew that the two people before him were not ordinary humans, but he didn't care. He loaded his rifle, hid behind a tree, and observed the battle. He carefully watched their every move, ready to intervene if necessary. At first, the yellow-faced man could hold his ground, but after a few rounds, he had begun to lose his advantage, getting hit by the black-faced man with a slash to his helmet, nearly losing his life. The yellow-faced man quickly retreated a few steps to regain his balance, but before he could stand firm, the black-faced man swung his blade to strike, giving him no chance. The yellow-faced man couldn't dodge in time and was struck on the shoulder with a slash. After that, the black-faced man slashed him in the stomach, inflicting a very serious wound. Severely wounded, the yellow-faced man could only retreat. Seeing this, the black-faced man raised his blade, ready to finish him off on the spot, without a moment's hesitation. Severely wounded, the yellow-faced man could only stand there and await death. Just then, Old Demon stepped out from behind the tree, deciding to intervene. He raised his rifle, aimed directly at the black-faced man, and pulled the trigger. A gunshot echoed, tearing through the silence of the night and changing the course of the battle. The shot was not aimed at the man, but only to break the handle of his blade. The gunshot startled a flock of birds, sending them flying chaotically into the night. After the gunshot, Old Demon looked back at the clearing. Both the black-faced and yellow-faced men had disappeared without a trace, as if they had never been there. Old Demon cautiously approached. He looked around, trying to find any traces of the two strange men, but found nothing. On the ground there were only two broken wooden sticks, one of which he had shot. In addition, there were many bloodstains and a piece of animal skin. Old Demon was all too familiar with the strange things in the village. After finishing his patrol, he returned home to sleep, not worrying about what had just happened. He had already forgotten about it. However, 5 or 6 days later, one morning, when he had just woken up and opened his door, something unexpected happened. He saw a dead rabbit placed right in front of his house. There were 2 teeth marks on the rabbit's neck, as if it had been bitten to death by some animal. He picked up the rabbit and walked around the house, but saw no one. He didn't know who had left the rabbit there, nor did he understand the meaning of this act. From then on, every few days, a dead rabbit or a pheasant would appear in front of his house. It was as if someone was secretly bringing him food. Old Demon was not afraid, but he was very curious about who was doing this. So, one night, he decided to stay up all night. During the day, he went down the mountain to buy a gourd of wine. After that, he sat by the window, drinking wine and keeping watch, determined to find out who the mysterious person was. He waited until midnight. Under the moonlight, he saw a wild animal with a dead rabbit in its mouth, slowly approaching his house. When it got closer, he saw that it was a large golden fox. The fox placed the rabbit in front of his door and then turned and left, completing its task. Old Demon discovered that a patch of skin was missing from the fox's shoulder and the wound was still fresh. He suddenly realized something, a strange coincidence. The children guessed that the fox was the yellow-faced man who was wounded in the forest that night. However, they couldn't guess who the black-faced man was. It could have been a black bear. After telling his story, Old Demon again returned to the mountain. He promised that when he ran out of wine, he would come down again, bringing with him more strange stories. We continue the story of Old Demon. He was a forest ranger, a job full of mystery and danger. This event happened when Old Demon's wife was still alive. She was a kind-hearted woman, always by his side, caring for and worrying about him. One day, after dinner, the couple lit an oil lamp. She sat under the lamp mending clothes, while he sat across from her, calmly smoking his pipe. As the couple was chatting idly, a loud thunderclap suddenly came from outside. The thunder echoed across the sky, making the window frames rattle, signaling an approaching storm. Out of nowhere, a torrential rain began to fall. The sudden rain made the old woman anxious, sensing that something bad was about to happen. Old Demon also felt that something was amiss. He looked at the sky and saw that it was not a day for rain. He went to the window to investigate. Looking outside, he saw that the rain was heavy and the wind was strong. The rain was a white blur, making the scene hazy and gloomy, very frightening. Not only was there heavy rain and strong wind, but thunder and lightning also roared. The lightning bolts continuously streaked across the sky, making people feel uneasy and worried. Old Demon felt that today's weather was a bit unusual. He told his wife that these lightning bolts seemed very fierce, not like normal ones. His wife also felt uneasy because the thunder was so terrifying. He took a puff from his pipe and joked that maybe some celestial being was nearby, undergoing a tribulation. His wife gathered her things and told him to put out his pipe and go to bed early. She didn't want to stay in this dark, scary room for another moment. The couple blew out the oil lamp and went to bed. They lay there, listening to the rain and the roaring thunder and lightning outside, trying to fall asleep. However, just a moment later, they heard someone knocking on the door. The sound was faint but hurried, echoing in the quiet, rainy and windy night. The couple was very surprised. In this deep forest, their house was the only one. It was so late. Why would someone be knocking on the door? Both of them knew that this deep forest had many strange happenings. They lay on the bed and called out, asking who was outside and what was happening. Amidst the sound of rain and thunder, a weak female voice called out, begging for help. Seeing this, Old Demon sat up, put on his shoes, and went to open the door. When the door opened, Old Demon was stunned. The sight before his eyes was so strange and frightening that he couldn't believe it. Outside, a heavily pregnant woman was standing in the rain. Her whole body was soaked. She was clutching her stomach, and her face was filled with pain and despair. His wife also came closer. Seeing the pitiful state of the woman, she was moved with compassion and hurriedly invited her inside to take shelter from the rain. The woman said that she was on her way to her mother's house but got lost. Now she was about to give birth, so she begged the couple to help her in her time of need. As soon as she entered the house, the woman could no longer bear it. The intense abdominal pain hit, making her writhe and scream in extreme agony. Old Demon's wife saw that the woman's water had broken. She quickly urged her husband to boil some hot water and prepare a knife so she could help her deliver the baby. Old Demon glanced at the woman and then silently turned away. He did not say a word, only quietly went outside to boil water as his wife had instructed. His wife helped the woman onto the bed and began to help her deliver the baby. She had done this many times before, so she didn't feel any difficulty or hesitation. Old Demon sat by the fire, calmly smoking his pipe. He listened to the woman's screams and his wife's words of encouragement, his face expressionless. After a long struggle, the baby was finally born. His wife joyfully announced that the baby was born safe and healthy. However, just as she was about to breathe a sigh of relief, she discovered another head peeking out. It seemed this was not a normal birth. She thought it was a case of twins and delivered another baby. However, she was astonished to see a third one also starting to come out, something she had never seen before. Old Demon still sat by the fire, nonchalantly smoking his pipe. He told his wife that there was no need to be surprised and to just let her finish giving birth. In the end, after a lot of effort, the woman gave birth to a total of 4 children. All of them were much smaller than normal babies. After giving birth, the woman tried to get up and said that she had to go. She thanked Old Demon's wife for helping her in her most difficult time. His wife disagreed, thinking that she had just given birth and couldn't go outside. However, Old Demon said to let her go and not to stop her. His wife was furious, thinking her husband was too heartless. It was raining and windy outside. Letting her go now was no different from killing her. Old Demon glanced out the window. He told his wife to listen, saying that the thunderclap seemed to be aimed directly at their house. His wife looked outside, and it was true. Lightning bolts continuously struck around their house, as if trying to attack something inside. At this moment, his wife suddenly realized. She understood that no ordinary person could give birth to 4 children at once. This woman must be something strange. The woman hugged her children and walked outside. She didn't want to implicate the kind couple who had helped her. However, as soon as she opened the door, a lightning bolt struck right at her feet. The lightning startled her, and she quickly hugged her children and backed away, not daring to step outside. Old Demon told the woman to wait a moment. He approached her, took off his jacket, and it seemed he had a way to help her. He draped his jacket over the children and told her to go. Strangely, this time the lightning did not strike again, allowing her to leave. After taking a few steps, the woman turned back and told him her address. She told him that he must come there to retrieve his jacket. Watching the woman's figure disappear, his wife was curious and asked her husband who she was. He only guessed that she might be a fox or a weasel spirit that had become human. Old Demon also didn't pay any more attention to it. He thought it was just one strange event among the countless strange things he had encountered. The next day, he again went on patrol as usual. When he reached the mountain crevice, he suddenly remembered the woman's instructions from last night, and he was filled with curiosity. Since it was still early, he decided to go and check it out. He wanted to know what kind of creature the woman was and why she had such strange abilities. Following the woman's directions, he found a large tree trunk. His jacket was folded neatly and placed on the tree trunk like a thank you gift. Old Demon approached and picked up his jacket. He felt relieved to have his item back, as well as to have his question answered. As he lifted the jacket, he discovered a few small gold pellets inside. He understood that this was the woman's gift of thanks, so he did not hesitate to accept it. As he was about to leave, he heard a sound coming from inside the tree hollow. He hid behind another tree, curiously looking to see what was inside. From inside the tree hollow, a family of golden weasels, 1 large and 4 small, emerged. It was only then that he realized the person he had helped last night was a weasel spirit. We will continue with another story about Old Demon. His and his wife's job was to watch over the forest, ensuring there were no timber thieves and preventing fires. Every morning, before he went out, his wife would prepare tobacco, wine, and a water gourd for him. She would tell him to come home early to eat dumplings, and he would happily agree. Although they had lived together for decades and she knew her husband's capabilities well, his wife would still see him off at the door every day, not forgetting to tell him to be careful. She would always stand at the door, watching his figure get farther away before going back inside. The love between the old couple was so deep that it was admirable. One day, Old Demon went out and patrolled the forest as usual. He followed the familiar trails. The job had become mundane. On the way, he took a shot at a wild chicken. He wanted to bring it home to improve their meal, a small gift for his kind wife waiting at home. In those days, there were many wild chickens in the mountains. Every few days, he would shoot one to improve their meal, a simple pleasure for the lonely forest ranger. It was almost noon, and he had finished his patrol. He carried the wild chicken on his shoulder, leisurely walking home, looking forward to a hot meal cooked by his wife. As he passed a small crevice waterfall, he heard crying. Legend has it that a large carp once transformed into a dragon here. The crevice waterfall was deep in the mountains, with very few people passing by. He curiously looked in the direction of the crying and saw a young man sitting by the pond, his head bowed, sobbing uncontrollably. The young man's clothes looked strange, and he had a few wounds on his body and face. At first, he thought it was a person picking ginseng, because only they wore red clothes. He hid behind a tree, seeing the young man cry more and more desperately. He worried that the young man would become irrational and jump into the water to commit suicide, so he decided to intervene. With that thought, Old Demon stepped out, approached him, and struck up a conversation. He kindly asked if the young man was in any trouble and if he needed any help. However, when the young man saw someone approaching, he stood up and walked away. He paid no attention to Old Demon's words, just quietly walked away without a word. Old Demon muttered that he was being nosy. He didn't think about it anymore, turned around and walked home, leaving the strange young man behind. Upon arriving home, his wife scolded him for being late and urged him to wash his hands and eat. The love between the old couple was very warm and simple. Before long, a hot plate of dumplings was placed on the table. His wife even warmed up some wine for him to drink with the meal, a very lavish meal. His wife was curious and asked why he was home later than usual today. He just lied and said he had passed by the crevice waterfall without mentioning the person he met. That night, Old Demon couldn't get a good night's sleep. The image of the young man in the red clothes kept lingering in his mind, preventing him from resting. The next morning, he quickly went on a patrol around the mountain. After that, he went to the crevice waterfall from yesterday to check, and sure enough, his premonition was correct. The young man in the red clothes was still sitting there, sobbing uncontrollably. However, this time, he had many new wounds on his body. He looked very pitiful and was in a lot of pain. Old Demon said nothing. He patiently hid behind a tree, waiting to see what would happen next, filled with curiosity. He waited like that for several hours. Finally, the young man seemed to have cried himself out. He stood up and left the pond's edge, walking aimlessly. Old Demon silently followed him. After about 2 miles, the young man suddenly turned and went behind a large rock, then disappeared. Old Demon was afraid of being discovered, so he didn't follow too closely. By the time he walked around the rock, the young man had disappeared without a trace. The young man was nowhere to be found, and all that remained was a small puddle of water in front of him. He felt that there was something strange, so he quietly approached. He held his breath and looked down into the puddle of water. The sight underwater astonished him, something he had never seen in his entire life as a forest ranger. Even though it was a drought, in the small puddle of water was a large carp, more than 2 feet long. It had many wounds on its body. It looked very pained. Old Demon now understood everything. He put his rifle on his shoulder and turned to walk home, because he had been hiding behind a tree for several hours. By the time he got home, it was dark. His wife worriedly asked why he was late again. He just lied that because the weather was dry, he was afraid of a forest fire, so he had to check more carefully and not be negligent. The next morning, before it was completely light, Old Demon woke up. He got dressed and left the house without telling his wife where he was going. He did not go on patrol as usual, but went straight to the crevice waterfall. He told his wife that he would leave early and return early, and that she didn't need to worry about him. He found a discreet place to hide. He ate the baked buns he had brought with him, all while intently watching the puddle of water from a distance, waiting for something to happen. About an hour later, the young man in the red clothes appeared again. He went to the pond's edge and jumped straight into the water without any hesitation, as if it were a habit. Before long, the water in the pond began to ripple violently. White foam splashed everywhere, signaling that a fierce battle was taking place underneath. Old Demon loaded his rifle and quietly approached the pond's edge. He wanted to take a closer look, to find out the reason for the battle underwater. When he looked down, he was utterly astonished. The sight before him was unbelievable. A life and death battle was happening right in front of him. In the pond, 2 large fish were fighting each other. One was the carp he had seen yesterday, and the other was a giant catfish. The 2 creatures were fighting very fiercely. The carp was clearly no match. After only a few rounds, it was bitten all over and blood was everywhere. After a few more rounds, the catfish bit off a large piece of flesh from the carp's belly. The carp seemed to have lost all its strength and was unable to resist. Old Demon knew that the black catfish was not a gentle creature. He raised his rifle, aimed directly at it, and pulled the trigger, deciding to intervene. The catfish was swimming underwater, so his shot went off course. The bullet only grazed its tail, injuring it and scaring it into diving deep to the bottom. The large carp could only float on the water's surface. It no longer moved, seemingly dead after the fierce battle, unable to survive. Old Demon thought he had acted too late and couldn't save the carp. However, the fish suddenly flipped over. It was still alive. Seeing that the carp was alive, he felt relieved. Remembering that it had not needed his help, he put his rifle on his shoulder and prepared to leave. As he took a few steps, he was suddenly called back. He turned his head and saw the young man in the red clothes had emerged from the pond, clutching his stomach, thanking him for his help. The young man said that he was the carp in the pond. He had been living there for hundreds of years, but because of the drought, a black catfish had come to fight for the water source. After finishing his story, he took out 2 fish scales and gave them to Old Demon. He said that these could cure his lung disease caused by long-term smoking. Old Demon did not refuse. He took the 2 fish scales and put them in his pocket, then said goodbye to the young man in the red clothes and left. Upon returning home, he followed the instructions, brewed the fish scales in water and drank it, curing his lung disease. However, he had no idea that this would bring disaster upon him. One morning, after having his breakfast, Old Demon put his rifle on his shoulder and prepared to go out. His daily work proceeded as usual, with no changes. His wife saw him off at the door, reminding him to be back for lunch on time. He simply grunted in response, pushed the door open, and prepared to start a new day of work. However, just as he opened the door, the clear blue sky suddenly began to pour with rain. The unexpected rain surprised him, and he felt that something was amiss. He was very puzzled. His weather forecasting ability was very accurate. He had checked this morning and was sure that there would be no rain today. It was very strange. His wife saw the heavy rain and advised him to stay home and wait for the rain to stop before leaving. She thought it was just a sudden downpour that wouldn't last long. Old Demon sat by the fire, lighting his pipe. He smoked while looking out the window, a feeling of unease growing within him. He felt that this rain was a bit strange. Having experienced countless peculiar things, he realized that this sudden rain was definitely not a natural phenomenon. His wife saw this and poured him a cup of tea. She advised him not to think too much, saying that rain and wind were a matter of the heavens and there was no need to worry. After a few sips of tea, he still felt uneasy. He put the teacup down and said that he had to go outside and check the situation before he could rest easy. His wife could not stop him. He hastily put on a raincoat and went outside, ignoring his wife's worry and pleas for him to stay. However, just as he stepped out the door, he froze. A pitch-black hand, several times larger than a normal human hand, was reaching through the crack in the door. His wife was utterly terrified and quickly hid behind her husband. She trembled as she asked what that thing was, unable to believe the horrifying sight happening right before her eyes. Old Demon froze for a moment, then quickly regained his composure. He rushed to the wall and grabbed his hunting rifle, ready to fight. He pushed his wife aside and raised his rifle without a moment of hesitation. A gunshot rang out, tearing through the rain and the silence, aimed directly at the grotesque hand. His shooting skills were excellent. Furthermore, a hunting rifle uses buckshot, so the shot shattered the pitch-black hand into pieces. The shattered fingers fell onto the floor. Black blood splattered everywhere, creating a horrifying and gruesome scene. Old Demon raised his rifle, intending to take a closer look at what it was. However, when he looked carefully, he was once again astonished, unable to believe it. The thing he had just shot was a mass of black catfish coiling together. They writhed on the floor, covered in blood, looking extremely bizarre and frightening. The couple looked at the catfish writhing on the floor, feeling an indescribable strangeness. They couldn't understand why this was happening. Old Demon told his wife to stay inside. He grabbed his rifle, deciding to go outside and check the situation to find out the reason for this strange event. As soon as he stepped out of the house, he was horrified by the sight before him. On the ground, in the puddles of rainwater, countless black catfish were swimming. The catfish, whose origin he didn't know, followed the rainwater, gathering together and heading towards his house. Their numbers were growing larger and larger. Old Demon knew they had come for him. He loaded his rifle, aimed directly at the mass of catfish on the ground, and pulled the trigger without a moment of hesitation. The power of the hunting rifle was great. One shot created a gap in the mass of catfish. However, in just a moment, they gathered again as before. Old Demon retreated while reloading, continuing to shoot at the catfish. He tried to fight back, not letting them get close to him. However, no matter how powerful the hunting rifle was, it could not destroy all the catfish. They would be shot apart and then reform without any decrease in number. He shot 7 or 8 times in a row. He only had that many rounds with him, and they had all been fired. There were none left. The ammunition was gone, and Old Demon had no other choice. He could only stand there, watching the catfish get closer and closer, piling up into a huge mound. First, they merged into a giant black sphere of flesh. The sphere continuously changed shape, looking extremely bizarre and frightening and ghostly. Gradually, the sphere transformed into a human shape. A monster made of thousands of black catfish appeared, standing majestically before him. If it were anyone else, they would surely have been scared to death. However, Old Demon was too used to strange things. He was not afraid. He swung his rifle to strike. Although he was over 60 years old, his strength was still great. One blow shattered the monster's head, but it quickly reformed. While he was still surprised, the human-shaped monster swung its arm to attack him. The blow carried a strong, powerful gust of wind. The slap carried a foul-smelling wind. Seeing that his enemy was not to be trifled with, Old Demon quickly used the butt of his rifle to block the blow, not daring to underestimate it. However, when the butt of the rifle touched the monster's hand, he felt a very strong force. He was sent flying, unable to resist. The blow sent him flying a great distance. Although his body was strong, the impact was so powerful that it almost knocked him unconscious. He was in a lot of pain. It took Old Demon a long time to get up. He felt his whole body aching, and his mouth bled. His injuries were not light at all. When he looked back, he saw that the monster's shape had become larger than before. It was slowly advancing towards him, as if it wanted to finish him off right here. The monster staggered towards him. Each step it took was heavy, leaving deep footprints in the ground. It looked very frightening. Seeing the catfish falling from the monster's body, Old Demon suddenly remembered. He realized that this was the black catfish he had shot and wounded. He struggled to get up, his heart filled with regret. He blamed himself for not shooting it in the head instead of the tail. The monster flew up and delivered a kick to his stomach. The kick was so powerful that he couldn't resist and could only lie still, enduring the assault in despair. Because the ground was slippery from the rain, the kick sent him flying a great distance. He crashed into a tree trunk, and the powerful impact caused him extreme pain. The impact dazed him. His eyes saw stars. He struggled to get up, picked up a rock nearby, and was determined to fight to the end. He stood up, shouting that he would risk his life against it. He held the rock and charged towards the monster without a shred of fear or hesitation. However, just as he raised his hand, the monster grabbed him. A bone-piercing pain shot through his wrist, and he could not hold on to the rock. The monster raised its arm again and grabbed Old Demon. It gave him no chance to resist, determined to have its revenge. It grabbed his neck, lifting him up like a chicken. Its strength was too great. He could not resist and could only writhe in vain. His neck was being squeezed. Old Demon could not breathe. He felt dizzy, his consciousness gradually fading. Death was very close. Old Demon thought that he would die here today. As he was about to close his eyes and await death, he suddenly felt his body become light. Old Demon fell to the ground, quickly rubbing his aching neck. When he looked ahead, he saw a very familiar sight. A large fox and the young man in the red clothes were fighting the monster. He was stunned, realizing that these were the very people he had helped before. Both of them had fought the monster for a while, but they were both sent flying. It was clear that they were no match for this powerful monster. Old Demon helped the injured young man up. The young man thanked him for his help, but also appeared very worried and desperate. The young man said that even if both of them worked together, they could not defeat the monster. They could only hold it off for a while so that he could escape. Old Demon disagreed. He said that he was old and did not want to get them involved. He only asked them to take care of his wife after he was gone. After carefully entrusting them with the care of his old wife, he struggled to his feet and, without a shred of fear, advanced towards the monster. With a resolve to die fighting, Old Demon strode towards the monster. He was ready for a life and death battle, not flinching at all. In the most critical moment, a gigantic lightning bolt struck from the sky. It hit the monster, creating a deafening explosion. Old Demon took a few steps back in fear. The fragments of the catfish splattered everywhere, covering him, and carried a burnt smell. When he composed himself and looked ahead, he was utterly horrified. The ground had been blasted into a deep hole, and everywhere lay the bodies of catfish. He slowly walked to the hole. The smell of fish and burning still filled the air. Looking into the hole, he was astonished by the sight. Beside the bodies of the small catfish, there was a large, burnt black catfish, more than a foot long. He realized that this was the one he had shot and wounded. Having narrowly escaped death, Old Demon was still standing there in a daze. Suddenly, he heard his wife's voice calling from behind him, which made him turn around with a start. After the lightning strike, the rain also stopped. His wife helped him home, but he no longer saw any trace of the young man in the red clothes and the large fox. On the way home, his wife was curious and asked about the catfish. He only vaguely said that it had come to seek revenge on him, without recounting the details of the story. One morning, Old Demon was busy chopping firewood in his yard. Although he was old, his strength was not inferior to that of a young man. Every swing of his axe was powerful and decisive, showing the resilience of a man who had lived his whole life in the forest. While he was working, he suddenly heard footsteps and someone calling his name. He stopped and turned to see who was approaching, wondering what was happening. The person who had just arrived was the second son of the village chief. He looked frantic and rushed, as if something very urgent had happened. Gasping for breath, He said that a big thing had happened in the village. His father had sent him here to invite Old Demon to come down the mountain to help. Old Demon hadn't had a chance to understand what was going on. He told the boy to calm down and clearly explain what had happened that made him so rushed. After catching his breath, the boy said that a water demon was causing havoc in the village. Hearing this, Old Demon was stunned and astonished. He continued to explain that in the last 2 months, several people had drowned. Everyone was rumored to have been pulled down by the water demon, but their bodies were never found. Old Demon understood the problem, but he said that he could only deal with things on the mountain. He couldn't intervene in matters underwater, so he told the boy to find someone else. However, the boy said that the person who specialized in catching underwater demons had died, which greatly surprised Old Demon, as he had not heard about it. He said that not long ago, a few children fell into an abandoned mine shaft. The man had gone down to rescue them but never came back up, so no one had reported his death to Old Demon. Upon hearing this, Old Demon felt a pang of sorrow. He told the boy to wait a moment so he could go inside and pack his things, and then he would go down the mountain with him immediately. His wife knew he was going to do a good deed and did not stop him. She only told him to be very careful, to leave early and come back early, and not to make her worry about him. On the way down the mountain, he asked the boy to recount the details of the water demon's attacks. He wanted to know everything so he could come up with a plan to deal with it. The boy said that the incident started 2 months ago. The first victim to be pulled down by the water demon was the wife of a villager named Liu. On that day, Liu's wife was returning to her parents' home. Because there was no bridge, she had to take a ferry across the river. Since she was late, she hurried to catch the last ferry. After the girl got on the ferry, there were a total of 3 people on board. The ferryman, seeing no one else coming, called out and pushed the ferry into the middle of the river, beginning the journey. Although the ferry was small, it was very steady. It slowly glided on the water, taking the passengers safely and peacefully across the river, with nothing unusual happening. Along the way, the ferry had to pass through a patch of reeds. Liu's wife chatted happily with the other passengers, completely unaware that danger was approaching. While she was talking, she happened to glance down at the water's surface. A strange sight caught her eye, which stunned her and made her feel a little uneasy. Upon discovering something strange, she suddenly stood up and was about to jump into the river. Fortunately, the person sitting next to her quickly pulled her back, preventing her from doing something reckless. Liu's wife suddenly went crazy, screaming that there was someone in the river and that she had to jump down to save them. Her actions terrified everyone on the ferry. Everyone on the ferry quickly held her back. After a struggle, she seemed to have calmed down and was no longer agitated, but she was still scared. When they looked back at the river, there was no one there. The water was not deep. They could see the bottom, which only had mud and rocks, with no fish. Everyone gathered around her and curiously asked what she had seen. She said that she had seen someone at the bottom of the river waving at her, and she didn't know why she wanted to jump down. Everyone on the ferry thought she was seeing things. How could there be a person at the bottom of the river and waving at her? It was illogical. Suddenly, the ferryman said that it was a water demon trying to catch people. His words made everyone on the ferry tense and afraid. The ferryman continued, saying that his family had been ferrymen for generations. When he was young, he had seen a water demon lure people into the water, and her actions were very similar. While he was talking, the ferryman had already paddled the ferry out of the reeds. Everyone on board breathed a sigh of relief, thinking that the danger had passed. However, to everyone's surprise, Liu's wife suddenly jumped straight into the river. Her action was so unexpected that no one had time to react or stop her. Everyone on the ferry was completely shocked and wanted to pull her back, but it was too late. When they looked down at the water, they were all so scared they couldn't speak. Liu's wife was being pulled away by a black shadow who quickly swam into the reeds and disappeared. That sight haunted everyone who witnessed it. Upon hearing the news, her husband, Liu, hired many people to search for his wife's body. They searched continuously for many days, but could not find her. The second victim was the son of a man named San. On that day, he and 2 other friends went to the river to swim, completely unaware of the danger. The 3 boys were playing in the water when, suddenly, he was pulled under by something. He only had time to let out one scream before he disappeared into the water. The 2 friends who were with him witnessed him being pulled down by a very strong force. They were too scared to jump in to save him and could only watch. They helplessly watched as he was pulled into the reeds and disappeared. After receiving the news, San also hired people to search for him, but there were no results. The third victim was the daughter of a man named Wang. On that day, she was washing clothes by the riverbank, a normal daily activity for her, with nothing unusual. Suddenly, a black shadow emerged from the river and pulled her into the water. She had no time to scream or react. She was submerged in the cold water. Those who saw it wanted to save her, but it was too late. The water demon's speed was too fast, and just like the 2 previous victims, her body was never found. After hearing this, Old Demon also found the story very strange. Although he had experienced many things, he still felt a little uneasy. He felt worried because he could deal with things on the mountain, but he was not familiar with things underwater. This trip would likely have more harm than good. When he and the boy arrived at the village, everyone recognized him. They guessed his purpose for coming here and all placed their hopes in him. The village chief was waiting at his house. Seeing Old Demon arrive, he quickly invited him inside, offered him water and tobacco, and was very enthusiastic and respectful. Old Demon sat down, lit his pipe, and took a long puff. He told the village chief that he knew about the situation and would try his best, then told him to prepare the supplies. He began to list the things he needed to deal with the water demon. The village chief listened carefully, not daring to delay. He quickly wrote everything down to prepare it thoroughly. The village chief called his son. He told him to divide the tasks and quickly prepare everything that Old Demon had just requested. The son quickly ran out. A moment later, he returned, carrying 2 bags, and announced that everything had been prepared. Old Demon tapped his pipe on the table, saying it was time to act. He put his pipe back in his belt, preparing for the life and death battle ahead. He told the village chief's son to bring watermelon and quicklime onto the ferry. He, meanwhile, opened his copper bullets, poured cinnabar into them, and reloaded them. After preparing everything, he carried his hunting rifle and went straight to the riverbank. Everyone had already gathered there, ready to assist him in the upcoming battle. The village chief and the villagers saw him off at the riverbank. They all hoped that he could rid the village of this menace and bring peace back to this place. After drinking a few sips of wine, Old Demon told the ferryman to paddle the boat to the reeds. That was where the water demon was hiding. After steadying the ferry, he told the young man to throw all the watermelons on the ferry into the river. His action made everyone curious and puzzled. He quickly obeyed, throwing the watermelons into the water. Before long, dozens of watermelons had been thrown in, covering the entire surface of the reeds. A clever plan had been set. The young man didn't understand his intention, so he curiously asked. He didn't know why they had to do this, nor did he know what the next step would be. Old Demon told him to pay close attention. Whichever watermelon sank, that was where the water demon was hiding, a very smart way to determine its location. He picked up his rifle and loaded it. The battle with the water demon was about to begin. Everything was riding on this one shot, and there was no room for error. About half an hour later, the young man pointed to a spot in the water and shouted. A watermelon there had started to sink, signaling the appearance of the water demon. Old Demon quickly ran to the spot. He wanted to confirm the water demon's location so he could strike accurately and effectively. Sure enough, in one area of the watermelons were slowly sinking. That was where the water demon was hiding. There could be no mistake. Having located the water demon's hiding place, he told the young man to sprinkle quicklime into the water. He wanted to use the quicklime to cordon off the area and prevent it from escaping. The boy did not dare to delay, quickly pouring each bag of quicklime into the water. He tried to do it as quickly as possible, hoping to help him defeat the monster. After sprinkling the quicklime, he raised his rifle and aimed it at the water. He told the young man and the ferryman to sit steady, waiting for the water demon to be forced to come up. Just then, a black shadow glided under the ferry. It swam to the area with a quicklime and then returned, as if it had been trapped and could not escape. Old Demon seized the opportunity, aimed directly at the water demon, and pulled the trigger. He shouted loudly that its final day had come and it could not escape. However, the water demon moved very quickly underwater. It managed to dodge his shot and was not injured. It was clearly a very formidable opponent. It quickly swam to the other side of the ferry. Old Demon quickly reloaded and followed, determined to destroy it. He held his rifle firmly, his eyes never leaving the water surface. He patiently waited, looking for an opportunity to deliver a decisive blow that would finish off the monster. As soon as the water demon showed its head, Old Demon immediately fired. The shot was accurate, without any hesitation or deviation, aimed directly at the target. The shot hit the water demon. His homemade bullet, filled with lead pellets, was extremely powerful and blew off half of its head and body. Because it was surrounded by quicklime, the water demon could not escape. While reloading, he told the young man to keep an eye on it and not to be negligent. The boy assistant stared down at the water, reporting that the water demon had disappeared. It had dived deep underwater, and there was no sign of it, which was very strange. Old Demon finished reloading. The rifle was ready to fire. He was curious and wondered why the water demon had disappeared so quickly. He walked around the ferry, carefully observing the water surface. Sure enough, there was no sign of the water demon. It seemed to have truly disappeared. Suddenly, Old Demon felt that something was wrong. He shouted loudly, realizing that the water demon had not disappeared but was somewhere else. The water demon had hidden at the bottom of the ferry. Just as he turned to warn everyone, the ferry was shaken violently, a sudden attack. Immediately after, the ferry was sent flying into the air by a very strong force. The water demon's strength was so great that no one could have anticipated it. All three people on the ferry lost their balance and fell into the water. They could not resist the terrifying strength of the deep-sea monster. In the last moment before falling into the water, Old Demon managed to see the water demon's form. It was a very frightening sight that would haunt him forever. Old Demon was determined to destroy the monster. Falling into the river, he couldn't swim. so this was a life or death battle with no retreat. In the final moment before sinking into the water, he fired his gun. The shot was aimed directly at the water demon's head, a fatal blow. One shot blew off half of the water demon's head and half of its body. The power of the cinnabar-filled bullet had taken its maximum effect. Old Demon fell straight into the river. He couldn't swim, only feeling his body slowly sinking to the bottom, his consciousness gradually fading. He swallowed a few mouthfuls of water, feeling his body sinking deeper. Death was very close. He had no way to escape his fate. Meanwhile, the assistant and the ferryman had swum to the shore. They frantically searched for Old Demon but could not find him anywhere. Suddenly noticing something strange, the assistant pointed in one direction and shouted. He had seen something floating on the water surface, hoping it was Old Demon. In the area surrounded by quicklime, a few bubbles rose to the surface. Then 3 bodies slowly floated up. They were the 3 victims of the water demon. Another person had also found Old Demon nearby. He had survived thanks to his wine gourd, which helped him stay afloat, a stroke of luck. The 2 of them brought him ashore and retrieved the bodies. The battle had ended, but the consequences were very heavy and tragic. Old Demon was taken to the village chief's house. Everyone gave him first aid, helping him spit out the water in his stomach. Finally, everyone breathed a sigh of relief when he woke up. The first thing he did when he woke up was to ask about the water demon. He wanted to know if it was dead or if it had escaped. He couldn't rest easy. The village chief said that the water demon had been killed by him and that its body had also been found. However, he still couldn't rest easy and wanted to see it with his own eyes. The village chief and his son helped him to the yard. The water demon's body was placed on a plank, covered with a mat. A foul smell emanated from it. Old Demon squatted down and lifted the mat. Underneath was a human skeleton, covered in snails, algae, and all sorts of other debris. The village chief was curious and asked him what the water demon was. He couldn't understand why it had such a strange and frightening form. He explained that it was originally a person who had drowned. Their resentment had condensed the things from the bottom of the river, taking on a human shape to harm people. After giving his instructions, he put on his hat and put his rifle on his shoulder. He declined the village chief's invitation to stay for a meal, saying he had to go home immediately. Meanwhile, his wife at home was very worried. From morning until night, she couldn't sit still, reheating the food several times but still not seeing him return. As she was at her wit's end with worry, the door creaked open. Old Demon had returned, tired but safe, which made her breathe a sigh of relief. His wife was both happy and angry, scolding him for being late, but he just laughed and joked that with his skills, there was nothing to worry about. His wife was not used to his self-satisfied look. She reminded him not to forget how he lost his eye when he was young, a not-so-happy memory. At the mention of this, he unconsciously glanced at an old picture on the wall. He was reminded of the things that had happened when he was young, a past full of turmoil. He changed the subject, not wanting to talk about the past. After that, the couple sat down to eat, and he poured himself some wine, his heart heavy with thoughts. However, his wife did not let go. She said that she had to remind him so that he would always remember and not be complacent, a loving warning.